I say we have no segue because we're always chit-chatting off air before we start these episodes, and then we remember that we need to start recording. So here we are. Welcome to another episode with Sarah and Mare. Mare, we are going to do a little case study, but we're going to actually share a question that we got. And if you guys have questions on a specific topic, always feel free to message us that maybe you'd like us to deep dive in the podcast on. But I'll let you kick it off. But we're going to be talking about thyroid.
Yeah. Can I squirrel for 1 second?
You can squirrel. So that's where we always squirrel before we start these, but then we finally start and then we squirrel again. But yes, you can squirrel.
First though, I just have to say you're glowing. Like your skin.
I'm glowing because of my ring light. Is it too much glow?
No. I'm saying like your skin is like
okay.
You've had something done, and I'm just like your skin is like skinning today.
Okay, so can we squirrel actually?
Yeah, because I had something as well, but I think we were both per usual vibing and didn't realize we were vibing. But go first.
Your skin always looks good to me. But yeah, I had a facial yesterday. For the first time in a couple of months, I am going to get back on a schedule now with her. And I'm excited about it. And basically, I've been doing some baby peels with her. I actually, just for our listeners, maybe we'll do a skin topic because I felt like I was dealing with rosacea and some acne related to that last winter, pretty bad. And I do think clearing up my liver, clearing up my gut, was really helpful for that. Just being mindful of some certain food triggers, but I have a lot of scarring and acne that will still come up. And since really working on that topical side, and simplifying my routine, super helpful there. So anyway, I had a little baby peel yesterday, and I am going to start microneedling in probably maybe a couple more appointments, but just to kind of help with some of that scarring. So I'm excited about that.
Well, your skin is definitely looking good. It's funny. So we did not talk about this, but I also did a little, well, it wasn't a facial, but it was a facial. And last Friday, last Friday it was. And so Sarah, nurse practitioner Sarah, we've had her on an Untamed podcast before, wealth of knowledge. If you're ever interested, we can totally link those episodes at some point. But I did do microneedling. So this was my 4th appointment, because I was somebody that last Christmas when she had a package, I was like, yes, please. I was like, Christmas gift to Mare. So I did it was a 4 appointment series, I believe. And so it kind of worked out great because Sarah, if anyone knows Sarah and I'm just going to speak for Sarah as well. We're not people that want to spend an entire day at a spa and just how I just don't know when we get
No.
let's get things done, move it along. I want the effects of it, but I'm not there for hours. That's just not my vibe. So anyway, having something done every 3 months, every quarter, I was like, that is something I can commit to. That's enough to say, hey Mare, time to look after your skin. So I did it's called Silfirm. And it's a radio frequency with micro needling. Really enjoyable. They do put nummy stuff on your face prior to. And so she she does your whole face, even on top of your eyes, down
Ooh.
a little bit into your neck into your, was it called your dégagé or something?
Yes.
My husband would kill me because his first language is French, and he'd be like, "You butchered that," but here we are. But yeah, had that done. Highly recommend. Good stuff.
Funny you brought up Christmas because I am putting these appointments on my Christmas wish list for sure.
Right. Well, maybe for another podcast. But I was like, I'm definitely going to need some help from the listeners for some Christmas stuff. But I think that we squirreled enough. I just had to say
Yes.
Sarah was glowing, and we will definitely do some skin stuff. But we had a great question, and we probably could actually coordinate this with like dry skin, etc. But the question that we received was, how do you approach a client whose thyroid panel looks normal? So anybody who's not sure, they're talking about blood work. So a blood work thyroid panel looks normal, but they're showing signs of sluggish symptoms, like this person feels fatigue, they're having constipation, they're having irregular cycles. So how would you approach that type of situation first, Sarah?
First, I would be asking what labs were pulled and what is defined as normal here. So if you guys have been listening, actually we did that episode on lab work, and was one of our earlier ones, but we look at things through a tighter, range, where you look at, optimal as far as, ranges go for serum labs. So not just like barely in a lab reference range, but where are we, within that range? Like we want to be more so in the middle. And again, we want to be looking at patterns as a whole, which I'll get to in a second. But so often thyroid looks normal on labs. We'll hear that, and we look over the lab work, and the only thyroid related lab that was run was maybe a TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, thyroid stimulating hormone, that hormone actually comes from your brain, not that thyroid gland itself. So we want to make sure that we are getting a comprehensive look at not just what the brain is doing, but then what that gland itself is doing, as well as the rest of the body as a whole, because we can't isolate, systems. Everything works together. So for us, a full thyroid panel is going to be that TSH, a free and total T3 and T4, thyroid antibodies, a reverse T3, and I think that's everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me actually ask you a question off of that. So say somebody gets, and then we can like move on. Say somebody gets a TSH and they get a free T4 and free T3 and they get antibodies, and say they're feeling these symptoms. Why do you think that it's important that we still get the total hormones in this picture? Say hypothetically, the person goes to the lab, and I'm just going to throw a scenario. The TSH looks great. Free T4 is a little bit suboptimal, and now free T3 is also suboptimal. So is that enough? And why should we have gotten those total hormones to kind of just fill in that picture?
Yeah, so your total hormones are going to be reflective of your overall production of thyroid hormone. So if we're not producing enough as a whole, that kind of clues us in on, okay, why? What type of stress, and I use that word extremely globally, what type of stress is telling your body, your brain, not to produce these thyroid hormones? The free hormones are going to be what's unbound and free, available, circulating for use. So they're helpful to look at together. And I would say if we don't have the total hormones, and I think I speak for you when we say this, it's not, we can't move forward without them. Yeah. However, it's next time we get some follow-up lab work, let's tack them on. That often comes up with the antibodies too. Like people don't have the antibodies. So just tacking them on, which, they're around like $25, for those antibodies. So not like crazy expensive if you're paying out of pocket.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually agree with you completely. I think that it's definitely not make or break, but if we're having these symptoms, I think Sarah and I are like the same page where we're like, okay, if we're going to do labs, like at least initial ones, let's go ahead, let's assess all the ins and the outs of things so we're not missing anything. And then, yeah, later on, maybe we don't run total hormones, maybe we don't run antibodies, but once we've, at least looked at that full picture, that really kind of helps us navigate everything else. Now, you mentioned labs, and I know that this is the person focused on thyroid panel specifically because their symptoms are fatigue, constipation, and irregular cycles. With labs specifically, I'll just stay on there. Outside of a thyroid, are you wanting to run sex hormones? And even if their cycles are irregular, do you think that getting like an LH, FSH is warranted in this situation?
I think it depends on the case and their history and the person and what else, maybe is going on. But to your point, like, for example, like if we are looking at, those symptoms of fatigue, constipation, yes, it can be a thyroid problem, but it also can be related to hormones. And it could be related to possibly low hormones or possibly an imbalance of, hormones. If we are maybe dealing with, let's say, like a case like post show, someone coming off like a hard like dieting period and maybe they've been reversing for a good bit, like maybe we do want to look at, again, like depending on, maybe their TSH is on that higher end, which to us signals the brain is trying to kind of, push out, more hormones, is trying there. Maybe we do want to look at a FSH and LH, depending on what else again is going on. So for me, it always depends on the person. But yes, like I don't want to just see that thyroid panel. I definitely want to see, yes, sex hormones, but I'm going to put that, if we really think it's a thyroid kind of concern, I'm going to put that like lower on the totem pole if we have to prioritize things. And I really want to look at lipids. I want to look at a CMP and a CBC because that's going to give us information about those kidneys, your liver, your electrolyte status, all of these other things, your nutrient status, all of these things that impact that thyroid gland. Because yes, we have this full, beautiful thyroid, set of thyroid labs, but if we have nothing else to go along with it, it's kind of like, well, let's talk, because oftentimes if we just talk, we can maybe get some information here, but we want to again think about what else is contributing here, because no systems work in.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this conversation to kind of like the next thing, and even before labs, do Sarah and I need to again get labs before we start addressing things? No, typically we're moving multiple rocks at one time. And one thing that, she alluded to with getting like the CBC, a CMP, is looking at liver, look at even nutrients like that alkaline phosphatase marker. Some other markers that if I'm really thinking like thyroid, I'd love to see like an iron panel. I like iron, ferritin. I'm really big on magnesium RBC and zinc RBC. Spoiler alert, zinc RBC is a little bit more pricey, but those just like rocks, because to, what Sarah was saying, when we're looking about nutrients, you can see a lot whether like if somebody is actually consuming, a large amount of protein and we're still seeing deficiencies here, like then we're starting to think about like digestive health. Before we go down the digestive health rabbit hole, and knowing that somebody, we're probably going to end up getting labs, but there is some free things that we want to kind of start triaging first, which is always what is free to them in their day to day. And I'm going to say, while we're having the lab discussions, we are talking about their lifestyle, we're talking about their nutrition, like what they have control over. They got to get up in the morning, they got to deal with their day, we're assuming they have to hydrate at some amount. Now it might not be enough, to which hydration status is a huge thing. So when talking about this case in particular, we're having a conversation, we're making a plan, we're talking about them about pricing, lab work, we're talking about access to a lab depending on what country they're in, doing that and making a plan. Then I'm going to say our next real step within this is looking at what's happening on the day-to-day, and how do you go about looking at like day-to-day stuff, like where are your eyes kind of going? I know they're going everywhere, but still.
Yeah, well, for you, what about like, okay, like fatigue, constipation, like those seem to be like their biggest signs. So for me, with both of those, I'm thinking about like meal balance and like, how are we spacing, our meals? Are we like having like balanced meals, regularly every, 3 to 4 hours? Like, do we have enough nutrition for your energy, demands? Those are like some like initial things that I'm thinking about, is more like that nutrition side with both the fatigue and the constipation. And then I also, with both of those, I start thinking about morning routine.
Yeah, which starts at night, guys.
which starts at night, but also your nighttime starts with your morning.
Yeah.
So I honestly, lately, I like to suggest people focus more on their morning than their night because often the morning is more within our control, especially if, female, like have kids, families, work demands, things pop up at work. Well, we can always wake up, at, a certain time. And even if it sucks, we can always roll out of bed when that alarm goes off and start our day, off right, which, for fatigue and constipation, that morning routine can be really big. How you set yourself up for your day. Do you dive straight into emails or do you take some time for yourself? Maybe get some sunlight, maybe get some water before you have your coffee. Actually give your body time to have a poop. These things like can go such a long way for both of those symptoms, and your thyroid health as well.
Yeah. Something I'll mention, and we've talked about this before, and I would encourage coaches to have a really broad lens and attempt to put yourself in your client's shoes. I do think that, so for example, I'll say this, like there was a time in my life that my schedule required, like in order for me to do the things that I needed to do, show up for the people that I did, and again, go through traffic, which, snow, winter, I had to get up at 3:45 in the morning. It's not glamorous. I don't recommend it. I'm not telling people that they need to do that, but there was a time period, repeat, time period where I had to get up at 3:45 in the morning so I could be out the door, I could be at the gym, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that, I've had conversations, especially about, constipation. And I've seen some people really put themselves in a box that if they didn't wake up and have a bowel movement immediately or within 10 minutes of waking, all of a sudden they felt like there was something wrong with their body. And this is where I take a step back from, being really specific. And I tell people, I'm like, hey, like you said, let's look at your morning. Is your morning truly conducive to having that? And I'm going to be honest, mine getting up at 3:45, knowing I had to walk out of the house at 4:10 or nothing would happen. That was not a conducive situation to me waking up, having a bowel movement at that time. Now, did I have a bowel movement that day? I did, but I wasn't in that specific window. And I want to be thoughtful for coaches. Like this is an opportune time to have these dialogues with your clients, especially if they're talking about constipation. Like what defines constipation to them? What is normal to your client? What is abnormal to your client? Who are they basing that on? Or what are they basing that on? This can go to even, people that think it's normal to never have a poop. But I did want to mention that. One thing to go ahead.
I would say we need a whole episode on poops and morning routines.
We do.
I want to steer us back to thyroid though, too, because you just got me thinking about this. In a deficit, we would expect that thyroid to be not in an optimal range. We may expect some fatigue. We may expect some
That's great.
slower...
Like, where is this person? Like, is she in? Yeah.
Right. Like, are these like, this question about like, they're symptomatic, but things look quote normal. Well, maybe things are improving or maybe things are down regulating. Like maybe we do have a full set of labs. Like, are we seeing like a trend upward post show and something that needs, continued support? Are we seeing trends downward? And again, like what else is going on? And would we maybe expect, these shifts? That doesn't mean we settle for them.
Yeah.
Right? Like going back to like, we have the episode on perimenopause and thyroid, like huge connection there. Like, so it's an awareness moment of like, yes, like this, like phase of life, like we may expect these shifts, but that doesn't mean we necessarily like just, let you, rot and suffer in fatigue and not being able to poop, right? Like that's not like the answer either. So it's somewhere in the middle. Even people on thyroid medication, like this comes up too, like, oh, well, my client is, or I'm on thyroid medication and I still feel symptomatic and maybe, labs are in range or where we would expect being on thyroid medication. What are you kind of thinking about with those cases? Because we see that a lot too.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's interesting because I almost want to kind of squirrel, but especially with thyroid medication, I think that a lot of people think that, set it and forget it, but it's kind of, it is a hormone replacement. Like, I want to be very clear with that. That's actually something that myself and somebody kind of got in it with. And I was like, no, like that is still a hormone replacement, but when we're using it, and that does need to be adjusted because we adapt as we evolve as humans. I think too, not to squirrel, I think like that topic we probably should have a whole nother podcast on, because I do see a movement right now, especially, like you mentioned on one of the podcasts, of even kind of guilting people that they shouldn't be on thyroid medication and everybody should come off of it. And I have definitely seen that go wrong, like two ways to Sunday, that's for sure. I think that thyroid medication in the right human being and the right setting, like, is amazing and necessary. I think that we always want to make sure we have the free things that we've been talking about, like, locked in. And maybe we want to even steer back towards some of the nutrients. But yeah, that's a huge topic in itself. And to which different types of thyroid medications, there's so many different types and so many different, I'm going to say, like, things within them that may or may not agree with somebody. Like, I'm working with a client right now that we're on, I want to think, like, different medication number 3. And the cool thing is for her, on paper, lab work, nothing has actually changed. But symptomology wise, things are very different. And she's very sensitive with regards to what is within those medications. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
a great conversation.
And okay, so I want to highlight that, and then we're going to get into like some of those whys. Her labs are the same, but she's feeling better. So with that, that's where, again, like, serum labs show us a lot, but sometimes they also hide a lot. And this is where we have to look at the person as a whole, because you could be on thyroid medication or not and have these optimal ranges, but be still struggling with symptoms because at the cellular level there is some resistance going on, because there is some type of inflammation, there is some type of, inflammatory response going on. Or, people don't think that micronutrients or not getting enough thereof is a source of inflammation. Like, people think inflammation and they think, maybe hard training or stress or gut or maybe we're thinking, whatever we're thinking. But not having enough micronutrients or, being deficient, that is a source of inflammation to your cells, because what do your cells need for those, building blocks? They need those healthy fats, they need those vitamins, they need those minerals. So let's focus on maybe some specifics for thyroid, because both for thyroid hormone production, so that's going to be those total hormones, as a whole. And then for conversion, so that's going to be conversion of T4, which is that less active hormone, to T3, which is going to be your more metabolically active hormone. We need certain micronutrients for that process as well. So what are some nutrients you brought up at the beginning there that you're starting to think of?
Get trace amounts in, like, seafood and eggs, which is, I don't think a lot of people think of that. I'm gonna say it's our favorite mineral, but one we talk about often, especially with constipation and everything else, and even blood sugar regulation, which it doesn't get a lot of shine for those things, is potassium, which, oddly enough, we've had this conversation too. Most people think bananas, but you get more potassium in potatoes. Also, yes. Avocados, great source of potassium too, great source of fats, which again, we need, as you mentioned, like the fat soluble vitamins, we need those to also help with regards to making our thyroid and everything else go round. Those and even iron and ferritin is really important, although we are not quick to supplement with iron, but looking at that, because low levels of ferritin, low levels of iron, that will be a concerning thing. That's going to not be great with regards to TPO. That can be a driver there. My last one is probably zinc. And again, another one that I don't think that we're super quick to supplement with, but that one also is going to be helpful. What you mentioned, the TSH and also conversion. So those are some big ones for me for sure.
So I'm going to just call out my tech real quick that you glitched out at the beginning and I accidentally clicked a button. So I didn't hear your first one.
Okay, no worries. So my first one was selenium.
Okay, yes, selenium. That's like one like
I think,
everyone thinks Brazil nuts, right? Which yes, I'm more inclined to start a supplement, if we're specifically looking to,
yeah,
boost that thyroid with, some selenium because, you know, we're looking for like around like 200 micrograms in most cases. I never like to just throw out dosing, but we're not for sure if those Brazil nuts are giving you that same amount, right? Like, so we're all for food first, approaches, but we're also for supplements, when, appropriate. And you mentioned again, like iron can cause constipation. So if someone's, already dealing with sluggish bowel movements, we might want to, not go to an iron supplement. I mean, we might want to go to, again, like food first for that and look at like other nutrients that are maybe going to support digestion or support, absorption of iron. You mentioned the potassium though, like aloe vera juice, I love for somebody, in this position because it's going to give you some micronutrients that's going to support the gut and, easy to, kind of add into, the routine there. I also might be thinking about actually vitamin C. And we were talking about like thyroid medication. There's actually some research showing that supplementing vitamin C, I think 500 milligrams, which is a pretty standard dose of vitamin C, supplementing vitamin C can help as far as that thyroid medication, working, and, seeing improvements in those that, kind of take it. So that's kind of, just kind of some cool information. And, especially if we are dealing with a gut case or someone that has been depleted for some period of time, we might need just more time really focusing on that nutrition piece. But yeah, as far as like supplements, like we always want to be mindful and like careful about like what else is going on. The vitamin C though is on my mind because I actually have a new product that I hope will be out. I think will be out. You guys are getting a first look, but vitamin C Legion just came out with. So we're also looking for that, like what's going to be easy for somebody to use. So like I mentioned like potassium, like that's like an easy add. It's one less pill to have in. We could go on and on about that, but yeah, I'm excited to try that one for myself because especially with people with gut issues, again, we might just need some more nutrient support and that kind of speaks to my own situation. So Legion again is third party tested. We trust them, code forward. But what else are you thinking as far as supplements? Ooh, I just thought of another one in my cabinet.
go ahead.
B vitamins. B vitamins are so important for so many different processes, for sure, especially for that fatigue aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So I know so we chatted that we would be talking about blood work with our client. We'd be starting to handle all of the micronutrients with regards to like their nutritional intake, looking at again what types of foods are we eating. I know one thing that's come up quite often for clients is a lot of people are into smoothies, love it, mean it, but everyone's like, oh, I'm so bloated. I'm like, right, well that's a lot of volume, my friend. So we're looking at nutrition. We're
Carbs. Are we eating enough carbs?
exactly fibers. Are we getting a lot of that? Are we getting enough of this in? And so at that point, I'm going to say that arguably you're probably going to start to see some sort of changes with regards to your client. Even looking at one other thing we didn't mention, but we started to with regards to the lifestyle piece is how's their life? What's going on in their life? When we talk about fatigue, stress, constipation, like there is absolutely a direct thing. And if we are seeking out the sole root problem is an organ within our body, like the thyroid is clearly the problem and did all this, we are really missing an elephant in the room here, kids. Typically, our body responds. I'm going to say typically, obviously, there's a lot of nuance here, but typically our body is responding to what it is presented and what it needs to do. If we are having down regulations, that is maybe perhaps it's been sending up flare guns and yellow flags, and now it's actually sending up smoke signals. And that is what it's taken us, to actually slow down. We talk about that often, that, women can feel horrendous, but my God, if they can still keep moving, if they can keep, getting up in the morning at any capacity, they will, white knuckle it through. And this could be the body's way of saying, hey, I'm tired of white knuckling it. And so I think that if we do not look at what's actually happening within their life, their history, like you've often mentioned, taking that timeline of events of what the hell has happened in the last 3-5 years. Some people, when they start writing down on paper, what has happened in their life, that is the biggest, holy shit moment I went through all that. And I think that is something we have to do, right? Sarah and I are not believers in saying, oh, it's this thing and just take all these supplements and do this and it'll fix it. But then you're not changing your lifestyle. You're not changing the, relationships that got you there. Maybe the negative self-talk or whatever trauma that, you haven't dealt with that you've avoided. That shit matters.
It does. Yeah, the thyroid might be the one impacted. I feel like every human kind of has just the way their body adapts to that emotional mental load.
It's a tell. Yeah,
the tells. And and even going back to we talked about gut being a tell in our what to do after a gut protocol episode, that yes, at the end of the day, we might need to support the gut, the liver, these sites of thyroid hormone conversion. But why are the gut and liver stressed? Well, probably because of some other, from stress too, right? So it's kind of, again, it's so I hate, and we would never leave people with that, right? We never would, tell a coach in our mentorship, oh, just have your client deal with her stress better. What the F? We all know that, right? We all know that, or, we need to be reminded of it. And that's where I think coaching can be really helpful to, be like, hey girl, or I just had this conversation with someone. Hey, girl, can we first look back at your last 6 months before we jump to doing something else? Let's look at everything your body has been through and give it some time here to heal. So we're all about supporting alongside, but ultimately that's the work that a coach can't do, right? Yeah. Because I mean, that's what we see so often is it's we're almost there, as far as feeling better, but it's still these things that are popping up, and that's where it's okay, let's step back. What are we not addressing, or what have we been unwilling to address?
Yeah. And I think that once you've done that, I think it's easier to look ahead. So for example, I did a consultation this past week, and, she was interested in body composition goals. And I was okay, so knowing that everything that we've just talked about, all the stress, knowing that your sleep isn't good, knowing that, you're getting ready, you have some major health things happening with members of your family, that is not for the faint of heart. I'd like to remind you that this is November, and we're getting ready to walk into the holiday seasons. She's in the US, so US Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I was do you truly feel, with telling me that your anxiety is at a 4 from a 0 to 4, and you're at a 4, sleep is not great, these family health things are currently happening, which are very big, November, December, do you really think that right now is the time that we should consider a deficit and add on, whether it's a deficit via food or adding on more cardiovascular activity, more time? Do you really think this is the time to do that? And she was no. And I was no, I don't think so either. I think, how about this? How about you work on continuing to feel good, work on being in the here and the now, continue to show up for yourself during all of the stressful times that is coming. And how about the W during these next couple months mean not losing yourself within the next couple months. Can't that be the W? And then come the new year, I was like, I don't care whether you like it or not, be a New Year's resolutioner. Be like, January 9th. I was like, who does January 1st? Nobody. January 9th, give yourself a week. January 9th, then you're like, let's lock the fuck in. I was like, but let's let the W be right now that literally your hair's not falling out, you're, not manic. Like, let that be the win.
And especially if that's the thing you want to do so badly and that's the thing that you always do. I want to shout out a W and maybe some encouragement that it's not just Mare and I telling you to do this. Like, this is so many women's realities and I love to see it. Not that I don't, love helping people with, fat loss goals too and, working through a diet, like, the time and place. But, one of my clients in her last check-in, just thyroid case, reflecting on where she is right now versus where she was, last summer, where, she could barely, hit a 3 mile per hour on a treadmill without it feeling like it just took it all out of her. And now, like, going into like her annual like vacation, and we talked about a cut because it's been quite some time, and it was kind of like, like could not. And she said in her check-in, like, just the way my hair is right now, she mentioned like the numbers she's able to walk and the incline she's able to do on the treadmill. She's like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to even, to lose, 2-3 pounds, for, a Christmas trip. Like, it's just not worth it to her to sacrifice like feeling strong. And not that she can't diet successfully when she chooses to, but the whole point is that she did the work when it was not comfortable. She made changes that were not always easy. And here she is, like, like over a year later, a totally just like in a different like headspace than she's ever been before. And maybe not at her lowest body weight either, but that doesn't matter to her so much anymore. And I think people don't realize that until you do it. And that's like the hardest thing, right? Like, is you don't realize maybe how good it could be, or maybe how not as bad as you think it is going to be in your head until you do it. And that goes for, cuts. And it also goes to, like, Coach keeps telling me to eat my broccoli, or, eat my veggies, or, get my fiber. And then it's like, when you just suck it up and do it, it's like, okay, like, it wasn't that bad. I can do that.
Yeah, I think that taking this conversation back to this client and this question that was presented, I'm going to kind of wrap this up by saying, ultimately, guys, this conversation that Sarah and I just had here at the end, the real conversation, that is the conversation as a coach you need to be prepared to have with this person. Is, yes, we can look at lab work. Yes, we're going to look at your nutrition. We're going to hydration. But we really need to have a big talk about what got you here. Whether it was something that, quote, you did nor you didn't do. It could have been, again, just a byproduct of life kicking you in the teeth. It could be so many things, but you're going to have a real conversation with this person about real expectations. And this is not going to be, at least in our book, is not going to be a 4 to 6 week transformation. Like, make an impact in someone's life and have those really big conversations. Could she start having more energy in 4 weeks? Yep. Could she be not constipated in 4 weeks? Absolutely. But unless you have had the real in-depth conversation with her and she understands maybe on some level how these things could have transpired, she arguably could be back in this situation quicker than desired. So,
and we don't want that. We're not settling for that. Absolutely not. And that's what we mean when we say rewriting the narrative. It's like, not just like, you rewriting your story. It's like us changing, that we're not going just, surface level here, as coaches or, as an industry anymore. So this was like, honestly, a very surface level, even of where we could have gone with thyroid. But, this question was from our mentorship group. So I'm just going to plug our course and our group mentorship as well as our one-on-one. I'll have all that info in the show notes, you guys. If you want to like have more of these nuanced conversations, if you want to unpack, client cases, that's where you can do that with us.
Yeah. And even
And
if you're listening to this and you are interested about your own health, whether you're a coach or not, you're a human being on this earth, and this conversation, this question resonated with you on some level, just piquing your curiosity. One, we do have that educational hub that we're happy to talk to you about, so that Fortify core level. But we're also, this is why we have one-on-one strategy sessions. So definitely reach out to us, and we'll see you guys next time.